Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'm going to have a bit of a philosophical discussion about how Brexit has changed things. Because often the focus is on trade or the wider economy, as data's way easier to find and use. But Brexit, I think, has changed our politics and society as well. And I'd like to pick on a particular aspect of that here. In particular, how Brexit has been more effective at warping people's perceptions about COVID than it has Brexit itself. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So it's November the 5th today in the UK. This is the day when we traditionally set fire to an effigy of someone who tried to destroy Parliament hundreds of years ago. And now I'm put into mind of thinking of how Brexit has set fire to the truth. A lot of career politicians take a course at Oxford University called PPE. Not protective equipment. You look at MPs who've been in Parliament almost all their working lives, and they probably have this degree, PPE. That is philosophy, politics and economics. Which, you know, the ideal course for budding MPs, you would think. They learn everything they need to become a politician. In reality, there have been doubts about its usefulness for years. A big problem with it, because you end up with virtually every career politician having this degree. So a massive problem is you end up with a load of MPs in Parliament, very large number of them on both sides of the House, all having a particular mindset, which was taught to them at Oxford, which may not really have kept up to date with the latest ideas on politics and economics. And even if it was, which I don't think it is, as soon as that MP's been an MP or been a graduate for 20 or 30 years, all of a sudden it's not in date anymore. But their perception is still that way. And it could be argued that, you know, should such a course be of any value to future politicians, it would be better changed and called Brexit politics and economics. Because Brexit is the new philosophy now. It trumps everything else in this country. Everything. Certainly whilst the Conservatives are in power, they're limited in the leaders they can promote. You know, people can say, oh, is this the best we can get? Boris Johnson, was he the best leader they can get? Oh, you know, Liz Truss, was she the best they could get? Rishi Sunak, is that all they've got left? And it's like, they may well have perfectly suitable leaders amongst their ranks. But anyone wishing to lead the Conservatives right now has to be a believer in not only Brexit, but the particular form of Brexit we ended up with. Facts which challenge this hard Brexit have to be dismissed as fantasy. And so perceptions become warped. You have to adopt fantasy as fact and fact as fantasy. And politics is in large part down to perception. And over the past few years, with both Brexit and COVID, I've seen that purely internal perceptions seem now very easy to warp. They only struggle when they run into an external brick wall. So take COVID as an example of where politics can impose a different perception to reality because it's internal. But it wasn't always. Boris Johnson initially tried to ignore the virus. We're going to take it on the chin, he said. We had a track and trace system in place. It was working. He said, no, stop it. Not just that he wasn't going to do anything extra. Stop doing even what you're doing. We're just going to take it on the chin. We're going to let it run through the population. He tried to warp COVID perceptions. He tried to adopt fantasy as fact, just like he did with Brexit perceptions, but it didn't work. He had to face the fact that the virus didn't care about his fantasies or his politics, and it was going to kill a lot of people. So 2020 was this bizarre metronome of government policy swinging between reckless disregard and punishing lockdowns when the fantasies collided with reality. Whether those realities were deaths or France restricting access to across their border without safeguards. But now the Conservatives have managed to internalise COVID. It's still a massive problem. It's still killing too many people. It's still clogging up our hospitals, leading to longer and longer wait times for treatment for other conditions. You know, it's no longer hitting external brick walls, though. So the government have been able to successfully warp perceptions because it's now purely internal. Even the media have been playing along with it. In theory, the media should be one of those brick walls, but they're not. And the way I look at it, take the way COVID is dealt with in schools, for example. Because schools full of educated people, educated, intelligent people. And yet it's warped the perception even in schools. When I was teaching, no student would have been permitted in class with, say, the flu or measles or anything like that. Go home. You're infectious. Bugger off and go home before you wipe the whole class out. But schools now are insisting that COVID positive students attend. Now, I'm no longer teaching, but as far as I know, they won't have adjusted their policies on infectious diseases, but they seem to have a new one now specifically for COVID. The upshot is that if that's the only infectious and potentially deadly disease a student can have, where the school insists they must attend if they have it, even though and no masks, in there, in close confines, poorly ventilated, because it's now getting a bit cold. It was a bit warm as autumn goes, but it's now getting cold again. Unventilated classroom, in amongst others, spread the virus around to others who can then take it home to their clinically vulnerable family. They insist they come in with it. If they had anything that was infectious and hazardous, I think I'm right in saying students would still be told to go home if it's not COVID. Or if they ring in, told to stay home. Oh, you've got measles? All right, then keep us posted. We'll send work home for you. Oh, you've got the flu? Are you sure it's not COVID? Are you sure it's not COVID? Oh, you've taken a COVID test and it's negative? All right, then get well soon. But if you ring up to say you've got COVID, well, you've got to come in then. A fundamental shift in procedure because politics has been used to deliberately screw with our perceptions. Very 1984. Politics has caused a warp in the perception of reality, and it has been able to sustain it because reality has not, as yet anyway, been able to crush it. It's having an effect, just one that's not easy for most people to notice. For example, keep saying this, the number one problem for businesses right now is a labour shortage. The Bank of England continue to point out that we have more vacancies in the UK than people to fill them. A big part of the problem, of course, is our post-Brexit immigration policy. You know, we shut ourselves off from the easy access to workers from the EU. No doubt you'll get the usual inevitable comments going, oh, we had it too easy with our cheap foreign labour. Still pushing the old Brexit wisdom of immigrants taking jobs from UK citizens. Well, those jobs are now vacant. Where's this army of British workers who were kept away from them then? The jobs are still vacant. But anyway, the point is, there are actually a couple of pressures at play here. First is, of course, our labour pool shrank from the size of Europe to the size of Britain and Ireland. But COVID has played a part too. We have a smaller proportion of people in their 50s and 60s economically active than used to be the case, I gather. Now, might be long COVID, might be just because they're stuck on a waiting list for treatment for something else. But it's poor health either way, because it's certainly not the economy. If anything, the economy will be pulling those people back into work to cope with the cost of living. But no, the fact that we have adopted a fantasy attitude to COVID, just as we have for Brexit, means that we can't face up to genuine facts. You know, there was a good line from Doctor Who in the 70s, which was the powerful and the stupid have one thing in common. They don't change their views to fit the facts. They change the facts to fit their views. And we can see it happening in real time. A concerted effort to warp people's perceptions of reality with regards both Brexit and COVID. Reality still exerts its control. It's still there. You can't avoid it, but you can deny it. Because it's not that reality is not exerting itself in an obvious enough way to most people. You know, those of us paying careful attention can see it, but we're not the majority. And debates are one thing. A debate is where differing views discuss the cause of a reality or how to deal with that reality. But the reality is still clearly seen by both sides in a debate. What we have here is a fundamental disconnect in society about certain facts. And although politics has always sought to dictate perceptions for millennia, really, since Brexit, it just seems much easier for malevolent players to do so. You know, maybe because they've created mistrust or at least ready dismissal of experts. Oh, the experts got this. That's what they say, isn't it? Oh, how come the experts got this wrong then? Saying it as if it's fact. They didn't get it wrong. You know, once you shut off the testimony of experts from public debate, it's way easier to change people's perceptions of reality. And you can see it coming. You know, you get the Brexiteers on social media or in the mainstream media say, oh, you know, the economists got it wrong on Brexit, didn't they? No. No, they didn't. And then now they say the same thing about the epidemiologists and virologists over COVID. Oh, well, they got that wrong, didn't they, in 2020? No, they didn't. But ironically, Brexit seems to have worked to change people's perceptions of COVID much more easily than those of Brexit itself. And I think that's because Brexit continues to bang its head on the external brick walls. Brexit essentially was about trade and immigration. You can't internalise that. Brexiteers promised that trade would go up and immigration would come down, but the reverse has happened. I keep seeing people trying to claim that our exports are to record high. They're not. This is a deliberate cherry-picking misreading of the data. They are behaving as if £1 billion of trade in 2016 is the same as £1 billion of trade in 2022. But it's not. The pound is much less valuable now. £1 billion in 2016, for it to be the same value, you'd need something like 1.28, 1.29 billion now, taking inflation into account. So the real terms value of trade is actually way down. It's all right comparing it in billions of pounds. You can't compare a 2016 pound with a 2022 pound. Even given that we had a boost to our exports this year, a big boost of oil and gas resulting from Russia's war against Europe, that's not going to last. But even without that, same with immigration. They can carry on trying to blame other things, but they can't pretend that their Brexit promises came true. Brexit doesn't just have the impact that can only be observed by those actively looking for it. It's got in-your-face impacts that the media either can't hide or aren't interested in hiding. But COVID remains internalised, not something the mainstream media are interested in, so the damage won't be observed for years, and it won't be observed until people can be honest about it. And that won't happen until those responsible have long since left power and the politicians of the time are having to deal with the mess left behind and thinking to themselves, well, we don't want to carry the can for this. Let's just be honest about what those Burkes 20 years ago did. So I think the impact of Brexit on the economy is easier to unpick. So it'll always be the main focus. It's also what interests most people. But I would say Brexit's also had a major impact on our politics and society as well. Just not one that you can point to a graph of easily. I mean, even when we remove the Tories, we're still stuck with it. Labour will be starting to reverse it, of course. We know they've got policies for that. But they still have to buy into part of the collusion, to the annoyance of quite a few people. And this is because people's perceptions have been deliberately altered. It's why the Home Secretary can make statements that people of my age would associate with the BNP from decades ago. That group was proscribed. It's made legal. But their rhetoric lives on in the actual government now. It wasn't possible a few years ago. No way a government minister could have used rhetoric like that 5 years ago. They can now, because of a campaign to change the way people think. And in no small part down to the trick Brexit pulled in getting people to accept absolute bollocks because they've been shut off from the explanations of experts. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.